Today, we have an action-packed episode, video, podcast just for you. Today, we are going to be talking about the drama. Yeah, that's right. Drama between Nick Fuentes, Candice Owens, Tucker Carlson, Milo Yiannopoulos. Ian Carroll weighs in, and we're going to talk about what he had to say. And then, of course, the Tate brothers got involved as well. So the drama is absolutely insane, out of control. I'm going to give you my opinion on it, break it down for you. And that's going to be a whole bit that we're going to go through today. We also have, and here's going to be something else that will shock you. I'm going to actually be praising Trump in today's podcast, which you may not have thought I would do anytime recently, which I haven't done recently because it has not been worthy of it. But whenever somebody does something that is right, that is in alignment with the universe, in alignment with humanity, we need to give them praise no matter what they've done in the past. So I will be praising Donald Trump. And then after that, after I'm done praising President Donald Trump, we are going to be talking about more of the evils of Israel. We're going to highlight another situation that shows how the Israeli government has exploited the United States government into allowing them to get away with crimes, and arguably crimes against humanity. So without further delay, let's get into the juicy drama that all started with Nick Fuentes, Candice Owens, and Tucker Carlson. So in order to understand this, and Nick does a great job of breaking this down from his perspective, of course. We haven't seen a lot of transparency from Candace or Tucker on the matter, but Nick has gone to great lengths explaining this. But I'll give you it kind of from my perspective and then a chronological breakdown of what happens, and hopefully I can kind of give you the high level of what's occurring here. So all of this drama starts back in July of 2025 when Nick Fuentes appeared on Candice Owens' podcast. Now, the way that it's described, now, from my perspective, I watched this podcast. I watched the first hour, and let me be honest, complete garbage. The podcast is one of the worst podcasts I've ever seen in my entire life, which is really disappointing because in July of 2025, when this was occurring, was whenever the war with Iran was getting kicked off by America and Israel. And to me, I thought this would have been a beautiful time for Candice and Nick to come together to talk about it because they have a lot of overlapping things. They're both identified as Catholics. They both are proud Catholics. And so to see them kind of just create drama, and this really is what created the chain reaction that created all the drama we're going to be talking about today, is for the entire podcast. They just talked about their history, the drama, why they don't like each other, times when Nick has called her a bitch. And from there, it all just spiraled out of control. So you watch this and it's just personal attacks on personal attacks. It's devoid of any sort of substance. And Nick was proud about it because he even went on X and one of his tweets was, you tried and got cooked. Then you cried about it to Tucker and got cooked again. And what he's referring to is that after Candice Owens hosted Nick Fuentes in July of 2025, Candice went on to Tucker's podcast, and for a lot of it, they just talked about Nick for, I think it was like 10 to 15 minutes, which is a long time. It's a lot of airwaves to be giving to him. But before we jump to that, I want to first jump into and talk about how they both identify as Catholics. And a lot of their language towards each other felt very anti-Christian to me. For instance, they're showing these leaked messages, and on X, like Nick, again, even straight up calls her a narcissistic bitch. And this just has me confused at this point in the drama of like, what's going on here? We just had the war in Iran, which Nick wears on his sleeve because he had been calling about it and saying that Israel was calling for this war to get America involved for it to happen. And then for all of this to play out right as Nick is covering this, because Nick had one of the biggest streams of his life. And so then Candice had him on her podcast. And so you would think that they would want to cover that to get more views, more clicks, all this stuff. But instead they use it as just like this soap opera. And then to put it all even in perspective is Candice put this entire podcast behind a paywall and didn't release it until like months later. She was copyright striking people who did release it on YouTube. And luckily I was able to see one of those videos before it, got put out on the paywall. But it was a joke. It was really kind of weird. It was really weird. Weird's the best description for it. So then moving forward, kind of at the end of July, beginning of August, Tucker Carlson brings Candace onto his podcast. Again, strange timing, to where Carlson goes into this kind of tirade of Nick, calling him kind of like a weird gay kid who lives in his parents' basement. And again, very strange, because I don't know if Tucker's like a proud Christian. I've never really seen him really talk too much about Christianity, but I know a lot of the principles he believes in is very much aligned with Christianity. And again, for them to go on these personal attacks when they're supposed to be journalists is very confusing to me at this point. But then Tucker says something that's very interesting, and in my opinion, very telling, because at one point in the conversation, Tucker says something to the effect of, Nick was, wrong about all these things, but then my dad, who died in, I think, March of 2025, Carlson in his little rant is like, Nick came out and said my dad was CIA. And I was like, no, he was not CIA. He was my dad. I would know. And I didn't find out until after my father's death that he was CIA. However, there is a podcast of Tucker Carlson on, I forget whose podcast it was, in 2024, saying that his dad was in CIA. He bragged about it, in fact, on multiple news stations. And then he even went so far to say that he would go to foreign countries that the CIA was maybe interfering with at the time for like vacation trips with his dad. And his dad was a journalist. His dad is who told Tucker to get into journalism. Tucker also talked about how his next door neighbor was a part of the people who created and installed the Shah in Iran. So to me, I find that probably one of the craziest parts of it. That Tucker comes out and lies about not knowing his dad was in the CIA, but there's video evidence of him saying that he knew his dad was in the CIA before him. And to me, that's crazy. Because then, and this is the next layer to all of this, is that Candace and Tucker have continuously been accusing Nick of being a Fed. He's probably a Fed. Why would he not be a Fed? Nick's defense is that he's had so much scrutiny. He's been kicked off all the platforms. He's been verbally consistent for the last 10-ish years. He's been demonetized. He's been canceled on YouTube, anything. He can't get bank accounts. He's been on the no-fly list. And his argument is why would they do that to a Fed? My opinion is it could be a smokescreen. We don't know. I don't know. I've never met the person. I try to stay away from stuff like this, especially if I've never met them. You can usually get a much better gauge of who someone is once you meet them. Nick does seem to be a genuinely authentic person. Hasn't really been caught in a lie like Tucker Carlson has. And then, because one of the other things that Nick Fuentes has been pointing out is that Candace, with the whole Brigitte Macron situation of Brigitte Macron, if you don't know this, Candace did an entire segment, a whole series on how Brigitte Macron, who is the wife of Macron, of the president, I'm forgetting his first name, but the president of France, she did this entire series how Brigitte, the first lady of France, is actually the father of the president of France. Now, I don't know if any of that's true, but the source of evidence that Candice uses, Nick points out, is a Russian document. And what's interesting is in the Tucker Carlson podcast, Tucker Carlson straight up says, oh, well, Candace, you're more likely to be a Russian asset than I am to be in the CIA, which is very fascinating, given the fact that Tucker might be. We don't know. It seems like he obviously has the ties with his father. It's weird if you just go out and lie about it. And having a father in the CIA is actually going to come up a little bit later in this story, as we'll get to. And then, where my distrust even goes another layer deeper, is Ian Carroll, who is known for being kind of like this conspiracy theorist who's always kind of trying to figure out what he doesn't know. And I really do applaud Ian on that. I think it's a very intelligent way to approach information, especially in this digital age where you never really know what's true. Ian Carroll came out and said that he doesn't care if Tucker is in the CIA. And to me, that is super questionable to say. That is very questionable to say, especially as somebody who prides themselves on digging and seeing the connections between everything. Because it is a big issue if you are trying to plant someone, let's say Tucker, who relates to people who live out on the countryside, who take care of their own, what would you want to call it? I guess kind of like a farm type personnel. If you're working on your cars, your motors, which is kind of the persona that Tucker Carlson has. If you're in the CIA, if the CIA wants someone to be able to control the minds of people in that demographic, you would want someone like that. And that's important. And that's very important to know, because then it means that Tucker wouldn't be acting out of his own intuition, out of his own personal belief of what he's reporting on. It would mean he's tainted. It would mean that he's in bed with the CIA, in bed with disinformation agencies, and is not purely in bed or doing what he's doing for the sake of reporting, for the sake of being a great news journalist. So that's why this matters. And it shocks me that Ian Carroll would have came out and said that he doesn't believe or care. He doesn't care if Tucker was in the CIA. And mind you, I like Tucker. I've seen a lot of things. He's woken a lot of people up. I think he's done a lot of research that has brought to light a lot of issues. But with that being said, if these people are controlled by Russia or the CIA, that's very important for us to know, because that means that they could change or steer public discourse in a certain way that may not be fruitful for everybody. And then where it gets even crazier is that Milo Yiannopoulos, who I haven't heard of in years, but I find it interesting he's finding relevance still, accused Nick Fuentes of being an FBI informant on X. Nick brought receipts on one of his podcasts showing how, because this is all centered around like January 6th, and he brought forth text messages between him and Milo that very heavily implicate Milo as actually being an informant of the FBI. And what becomes crazy, and we see this all the time in politics, is that what people accuse other people of being, they tend to be themselves. And that's very important whenever you get information, is that if you accuse people of being X, Y, and Z, they come out and be X, Y, Z later. You're just realizing that they're projecting or trying to numb down the criticism on yourself whenever you get found out. It's a very strange phenomenon. I don't know too much about why it happens, but it is very, very often the case that when people come out and accuse someone of being something, they are that thing. But what's interesting, and this is the next layer to it, is that then Elon Musk gets involved. So Milo on Twitter, on X, accused Nick of being an FBI informant. And then Elon replied to that tweet with, And obviously the intention is to amplify that claim because of Elon's reach, because he has manipulated the algorithm to boost his own posts. So I don't even know what to think, but it is very fascinating. Because then Nick even came out and tweeted, Tucker, Elon, and Candace versus me. Matrix attack. Now, if you don't know, Matrix would be like the whole system, right? Think of, if you haven't seen the movie in 1999, you have to watch it. It's called The Matrix. Basically, the whole idea is that the entire world as we know it has been taken over by machines, and the real world is harvesting human energy, human blood, organs, power, in order to power up the machines, because there's a whole blackout. It's a long thing. And so whenever he says Matrix attack, basically he's saying the entire system is now trying to fight against Nick because he's exposing something, he's showing something he shouldn't show. Now, what I find interesting is maybe right? Maybe that is a Matrix attack. Or could it also be possible that this is a way to bolster up Nick? Could it be a way to get Nick into the mainstream conversation? Because for the longest time, Nick has been pushed out of all of these circles. He has been on the outside. But the ripple effect of this, the amount of ripples that are affecting and going outward is insane. The amount of people, the amount of attention that this is getting, it got Nick probably one of his biggest views on Rumble, one of his biggest video views on Rumble. I think it's probably pushing 1 million views at this point, which for Rumble is a lot. For this area field is a lot. So I don't know. Could Tucker, Elon, and Candace, could this just be like a way for them to actually push Nick into the limelight? But I don't know. And here's where let's go to the next thing, because this is actually going to tie into my personal beliefs and opinions on all this. Andrew Tate got into the mix near the end of August 2025, which we are at right now, where Tate kind of came in and didn't really know all of the story, and you need to understand that he's also been on Candace's podcast, and he's been interviewed on Tucker's podcast as well. And he has, I think, a working or like a good relationship with them. And I don't know specifically what Andrew Tate or Tristan Tate said, but the way I think that it became interpreted was that Andrew was on and Tristan were on their side, that they were going after Nick for essentially not like letting certain things go and creating more tension, creating more problems. Now, Tristan and Myron Gaines did a podcast with Nick. They all did it live streaming kind of deal. And I watched maybe the first 30 minutes of it, but it was a good 30 minutes. And in there, you understand that Andrew's mindset is kind of this idea of we need to put the pettiness aside and focus on what's important and come together. Nick kind of was explaining to him kind of the history of what had happened, what was going on, trying to explain his side of things. And what I saw in that, not that Nick's wrong, but what I saw in that is it feels as though, and mind you, Nick is, I think, 26 years old. So first of all, and I want to say this as well before I get into my assessment of it, Nick's a very intelligent kid. He has a ton of knowledge. He's very articulate, very entertaining. He's hilarious. He says very controversial things, which I think is by design. As an entertainer, you do that to get people to talk about you. You create drama. So now people like me are talking about you. And I think he's very wise. But what it feels like and what it felt like when he was trying to explain himself to Andrew is that it feels as though Nick has just a little bit more of maturing to do. And Nick, if you're watching this, I say that with all the love in the world, because what Nick has accomplished should not go by the wayside. The amount of attention, the amount of views, the amount of followers that he has garnered is very respectable, very respectable. And I see it as like this almost trapped rat situation. Is you can be in a situation where you keep getting attacked, and you lash out. But it's hard for me to say that given the fact of what kind of went down, you know? Given the fact that the way Candace kind of ambushed him, the way Elon came out and kind of just said, the way Milo just posted this thing whenever it seems like Milo might actually be an informant based on text messages that he sent to Nick. So I don't know. And this could just be drama. Could just be drama that he's just pandering up to get attention. So I really don't know what actually is going on. I do think, and hopefully this is bringing more attention as a whole to, at some level, the core ideas that Nick and Candace and Tucker kind of all agree upon, which is the fact that our entire government has been getting sucked dry by Israel. Because they all fundamentally agree on that. And it would be great to have them in the same room and actually talk about it. And I think that's one of the beautiful things that I learned from Nick's conversation with Andrew Tate, is that Andrew Tate, Nick has his phone number. So they can just talk if they need to talk. I do have issue with Tucker just kind of being like, well, you know, Nick's some gay kid living in his parents' basement from Chicago. And it doesn't make sense to me that you can't just pick up the phone and talk about it, talk it through like adults. So as quickly, and I want to kind of backtrack here, because even as I say, Nick has some maturing to do. Maybe it's everyone in this conversation has maturing to do. Or maybe it's all a part of the drama that they're trying to create. And what's interesting about Andrew Tate getting involved in this is it goes back to the dad being CIA. And this is the key difference, is that Andrew has always talked about how his dad was in the CIA. He got dishonorably discharged for not following orders, XYZ. And so I think that's important, that you're constantly, how do I say this? Being forthright with those items, being forthright with, you know, your history, what you've been exposed to, who's involved. And there's a complete difference there between Andrew Tate explaining about his father in the CIA versus the way that Tucker Carlson has been handling it. And we haven't heard anything from Tucker since those comments, which I think is also possibly very telling. Why not have him on? I mean, Nick's essentially if not, he's at mainstream this point. So we'll see. We'll see what's happening. I think it's going to be a very interesting thing to see what comes out, what comes of this, how it plays out, what occurs. But now now leave the drama aside. I want to get on to some more important topics. I want to get into something that Mr. President Donald J. Trump is doing some good stuff. And I want to praise him for that. There are two things in particular that he has done, and I want to acknowledge because I think it's very important. And number one is that he is delivering on his campaign promise to make DC safe. He said, I think about at least 20 times throughout campaigning for this election, is that he would make DC safe. And what is interesting about this is that he did invoke an executive action to militarize the police to come into DC to clean up the area. Now, something that is important and is interesting is that per the U.S. Constitution, the Congress is responsible for governing Washington, D.C. And this is found in Article 1, Section 8, Clause 17. It grants Congress the power to exercise legislative action. Let me see. I have it up here. I want to quote it for you. To exercise exclusive legislation in all cases whatsoever over such district, not exceeding 10 miles square, as may by secession of particular states and the acceptance of Congress become the seat of the government of the United States. So this essentially gives Congress ultimate authority over the governing of DC. It allows it to make laws, oversee its administration, and forthright. And they have some local government now. It's a long thing, but the point of the matter is that the Constitution gives Congress it. So I do find this as kind of a interesting snub, if you will, because if Congress is supposed to be in charge of it, they can't get it under control. Trump's going to come in and say, look, I'm going to do it. And I think this is good. I honestly think that it's a good thing if we're going to be starting to clean up cities. I don't know about military action, but I think that there are probably policies that need to be in place, laws that need to be passed to make it beautiful. And so it's hard to know with the numbers, but they are saying that crime is being reduced. They're starting to beautify the area. And so I think that that's good. I think that's genuinely a good thing for us to be doing that. And so President Donald Trump, I commend you on that. I think that's something that we need to be more proud of, is making our cities beautiful. Because if our cities are beautiful, then it's like the outward reflection, right? If your entire home has trash in it, you're going to feel like trash. Then you're going to act in a trashy manner. So in order for you to be rich, to be powerful, to be, feel good, you need the world around you to be beautiful and feel good. And so even from like a spiritual mindset, I know this isn't really a spiritual episode that we do, but the way that the energy works, if you want to say, in the United States is it all starts in DC. It all starts in Washington. That's the capital. That's like the brain of the operation. So if that place is dirty, if there's graffiti everywhere, if there's homeless, if there's, trash everywhere, that energy will spiral out to the rest of the country. It'll create massive problems for the entire country. And it's kind of the butterfly effect. It's entanglement. It's, quantum energy. That's how it works. That's how it's always going to work. So by beautifying, if we actually beautify that city, that'd be great. And so I give Trump some, praise for that. I think that needs to be done. He got in a little bit of a spat with Gavin Newsom over it. I don't know all the details of that. It's also out of the scope of what we're going to talk about today, because I do want to get on with praising Donald Trump, because he did some other stuff too. Can you imagine? Can you imagine that I am praising Donald Trump another time? Now, what I want to praise him on here is probably the most important thing in the entire world, and that is creating peace. Now, yes, we have not yet gotten peace in Ukraine or in Palestine. Those are very important, and I do believe that he has the power and the ability to do it. We're going to see if he will do it, but I know he can do that. Let's see what happens. We need peace between Russia. We need peace in Israel. We need peace everywhere. So what I do want to take a second, and I did look this up to confirm it all, but he has been in the U.S., so whether it's him or his administration, has been a part, of at least 5 different peace deals that has occurred since his presidency, which I do think is amazing. On May 10th, 2025, he had the peace deal between India and Pakistan, described it as a long night of negotiations, but luckily they were able to find peace. Then you have the Rwanda and Democratic Republic of Congo, June 27th, where the U.S. helped broker a peace agreement, which ended nearly a 30-year conflict involving a rebel gang. A whole long story. We're not going to go too deep into it. The next one I think is a little, it could kind of go both ways, which is a peace deal between Israel and Iran on June 24th. I think it could have probably been prevented. I personally don't think that. I think it's hard to say because I don't have all the information, but I would say, and I would articulate that Trump could have prevented Israel from starting that war, because they did. Israel 100% started that war. And then they're like, oh, well, we attacked first because, if they were going to attack, then we had to attack before they attacked. Craziness. But they did ultimately find peace. Peace was restored. So at some level, they're involved in that. I got to give them praise. The next one, July 28th, they found peace between a ceasefire between Thailand and Cambodia. There was a deadly border clash, if you don't remember, that displaced over 260,000 people. Trump claimed that he spoke with both of these leaders, and he was going to halt the trade talks with them if they didn't come to a peace agreement. So apparently, the ceasefire stopped immediately. So I got to give him praise for that. And the very last one would be the Armenia and Azerbaijan peace agreement that occurred on August 8th, where the leaders of Armenia and Azerbaijan, they signed a U.S. brokered peace agreement, which was at the White House, and it ended decades of conflict. So, look, I think that what I will say is that if Trump is able to end, I've given him a lot of crap. I've been pretty strict on President Trump, but if he is able to stop the genocide that's happening in Israel, because that's not a war, that's just a straight up genocide. If he's able to stop that and establish a Palestinian state, I think you need to establish the Palestinian state. Otherwise, it might be all for naught. But if he can at least stop the genocide that's occurring in Israel and Gaza, and if he can prevent us from getting into a war with Russia and end the war with Ukraine, and then, here's the last caveat, not start any more wars, no more wars, I will say that he is the peace president. In that instance, I will give him that title. So you need to do three things. Stop the bloodshed in Gaza and the West Bank. Stop all that bloodshed. End the Russia-Ukraine war. And no more wars. Don't get into a war with Russia. Do not let them bait you into it. Stop all of those things. And I will say, hey, look, okay, maybe in that situation we give him the Nobel Peace Prize. Because I know Benjamin Netanyahu, the incarnation of the devil, wanted to give him or nominate him for the Peace Prize. But if he does those three things, I think that I'd be open to it. I would support him in getting a Peace Prize if he's able to pull those three things off. But speaking of evil and Israel, if you didn't know, because nobody is covering it, there was a sting operation that occurred in Las Vegas because there were like a children's sex trafficking ring. And so they had a sting operation in Vegas. And so early in August of 2025, because again, not many people were reporting on this, there was a guy by the name of Tom Artorium Alexandrovich, who is a senior division head at Israel's National Cyber Directorate. He was arrested during the sting operation to capture child predators. Now, why is this important? It's not because Israel has probably the largest number of child sex traffickers and not child predators in Israel. It's not that per capita. It's not that. But it's because he faces charges of, quote, luring a child with a computer for a sex act, end quote, as part of the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police and FBI sting that led to the arrest of 8. Now, here's the issue. After posting a $10,000 bond, which is absolutely insane, that's all the more he posted, Alexandrovich was released and returned to Israel. And here's the thing. Israel doesn't have an extradition treaty with the United States. This is why Israel is Pedo Island 2.0. The National Cyber Directorate placed Alexandrovich on leave pending further details from U.S. authorities, with no official charges yet reported. Las Vegas police expect indictments, but no trial has occurred. And it won't happen, if I'm being honest, because this happens time and time again, where people who are dual citizens in Israel, they get pinched and they fly off to Israel. This happens all the time, and nobody's reporting it. Why is nobody reporting it? Why? Does it maybe make our quote-unquote greatest ally look bad? Wouldn't that be a bad look if America's greatest ally was Pedo Island, was the land of pedos? Yeah, that'd be a pretty bad look for America, wouldn't it? But, as always, I do want to end this on good news. And that is that Italy has turned on Israel. They have said no more. They have told Israel that the war needs to end. And I believe, let me find this. Oh, wait, there is another thing of evilness that Israel is doing. And it's just absolute sad. Italy turns on Israel. Let me find an article for you guys. Should have had all this ready for you. End war. There it is. Okay, but before we get into that ending of the war, I do want to kind of... Another sad thing that to me just shows that Israel and Benjamin Netanyahu are not good faith actors. Because right now, Iran is facing kind of like a water crisis. They have a drought right now, and they're not able to get water. There has been speculation that that is because of Mossad. There's no evidence to support that. But there are claims that that is the case. And then, you know what happened? Is Benjamin put up Benji, little BB, posted a video on social media directly addressing the Iranian people, telling them that he will give them water if they oppose their regime, promising him the Israeli water technology to give them more water, to desalinate water, telling them that, quote, "Greetings from Jerusalem, to the proud people of Iran. Your leaders forced the 12-day war on us," which is a lie he started, "and they miserably lost," Netanyahu said, referring to the war. He said, quote, "They lie through their teeth, but on rare occasions they tell the truth." Sound like anybody you know? Netanyahu continued and paraphrased Iranian President Mossad Pezeshkian. I apologize if I mispronounced it. Netanyahu said, quote, "We have problems with water, electricity." Oh, wait, no. This is the Iranian president speaking. Oh, no. Shit. What is this saying? Oh, he paraphrased. Yeah, see, this is the problem. I get excited and I try to put in my words into the article and then it kind of gets all jumbled up. So Netanyahu continued and he was paraphrasing the Iranian president. Quote, "We have problems with water, electricity, money, and inflation. Where don't we have a problem? There won't be any water in the dams in September or October." He's right. Everything is collapsing, Bibi said. "In this brutal summer heat, you don't even have any clean, cold water to give your children," end quote. And mind you, he has a pitcher of water and he is drinking water throughout this entire video. It's so disgusting. And so his thing to the Iranian people is, if you stand up and you protest your government, we'll give you our technology. We'll help you out. We'll give you water. And I find that to be just so evil. Talk about regime change, talk about election meddling, whatever you want to call it. But to me, that is just pure evil. If you have the ability to give people free water, if you're a country that is taking in $4 billion from America, just give people water. I mean, that should be a human right, if anything. Water, food, housing, these things that are just basic items we need to live should be a human right, in my opinion. Not to mention the fact that they have the ability and they're like, you know what? If you oppose your government, if you allow us to install someone that we like, who's going to be pro-Israel, who's going to allow us to carry out our Greater Israel project and expand, taking up some Iranian territory, then maybe we'll give you some water technology. Because who knows? If anything, and here's the worst part, what they could do, and this just came to me, you make the Iranians dependent on your technology. Then they take your technology, they put in your own leader, and then you can create a side in Iran by just cutting off their water because they rely on you for the water. Jeez, oh man. Gosh, that's evil, man. That's really evil. They would be able to do that too. Once they get what they want, they're going to go to the next step because they want the Greater Israel project. So then they could just cut off water and that would that would devastate people. It would crush them, just like they're doing in Gaza right now. If they're willing to do it to Palestinians, they'll easily do it to Iranians too. Wow, that's crazy evil. I didn't think about that. We have to stop them. Listen, this government in Israel has to be stopped. We need Israel to elect and put someone in power who does not want side. And that's, I'm not here calling for regime change, but I think what you have to realize is it's what a lot of the Israeli people want. Before October 7th, they were protesting Bibi Netanyahu. They didn't like what he was doing. And a lot of protests have been erupting in Israel, but nobody's talking about it. They're hiding that information because that would be really bad for the Israeli government, amongst other people. Wow. They could do that. I never thought about that. Give them the technology. Of course, you can hijack technology easily. I mean, Israel basically said, they planted those explosive devices in the pagers. Remember that? And then they killed, I think, like 200 people in a blink of an eye by just setting off the explosion in those pagers that they created. Wow. And then they could just completely destroy Iran if they become dependent on their water supply, their water technology, because they'll obviously put a failsafe inside that water supply, inside the technology, that they could easily just like shut it off. Wow. Wow. Things get dark once you start connecting the dots. That's crazy evil. Now we'll go on to my good thing. Let's go on to the good thing. Italy has joined the Allies in urging Israel to end the war in Gaza, which I think is absolutely beautiful. They said, quote, "The bombing must end. Humanitarian assistance must resume as soon as possible. Respect for international humanitarian law must be restored." I think that's absolutely accurate. They said the legitimate reaction of the Israeli government to a terrible and senseless act of terrorism is unfortunately taking absolutely dramatic and unacceptable forms, which we call on Israel to immediately stop. Antonio Tajani, the Italian foreign minister, said this in an address to parliament. Yeah, and I mean, I'm completely on board with that. And so I think that's great. Like, the world is starting to wake up. I feel that more pressure needs to be put on them to stop this. I've seen people dropping in food, and that's terrible because that's killing people as well, because the food cartridges will land on people. It's actually really sad to watch. And so Israel's creating blockades to prevent them from getting food in. It's all ugly and terrible. But the good news is that it seems like people are waking up, because Italy has now joined Canada, UK, Spain, Australia, and France in saying that, look, we're going to recognize a Palestinian state if you guys don't, clean up your act, which they absolutely need to do, because it's been an absolute genocide since then. And I'm looking at the time now, and this has actually been a monster podcast. So I appreciate you guys all for watching as long as you have. I appreciate you all for being here. And listen, we're going to create world peace. It's just an inevitability of life. You need to join the American Congress Party. You need to subscribe. You need to just consume more of this information so that you can be more intelligent moving forward. So you know how we are able to create a better world, a better future for the next generation. Because that's what all of this is about. Creating a better world for the next generation. And so I appreciate you all. Thank you for being here. Thank you for your patience with me as I kind of fumble around every now and then. But I truly love you guys. I think what is happening in the world is a really powerful turning point. And even though as much as dismal as there is a lot of peace out there. There's a lot of hope. We have to come together. We have to work together. Because if we don't, then evil's going to win. It's the tale as old as time, right? Evil is always like together, and they're always trying to commit evil. But then good people are just like, look, we're happy. Just be chill. And then evil finds a plot to kind of make things bad, and then like sneaks up on you. But then the beautiful thing is that in every single biblical stories, but any story at all, good then comes in just at the last moment and wins. And by good, I mean people who are pro-humanitarian, people who want world peace, who want to save the world. And so we are at that inflection point right now where good people are starting to wake up, realizing that the world we are inheriting is much worse than death. And what you have to realize is that when the world becomes a place where death would be better than where we're currently at, that's when it takes action of good men to do something. And there's going to be a financial collapse that's going to hit America soon. You think 37 trillion, they're projecting 38 trillion by the end of the year in debt. You think that's not going to collapse our market? We are on the brink of an economic collapse. And when things get so bad that death would be comparable to your current living situation, that's when radical change happens. That's whenever we change. That's whenever that's when the world will enter a different spiritual revolution that will occur. That is whenever power will be restored to the American people. We will no longer be getting sucked by Israel or sucked by all these other countries. Our money will stay in our pockets. We will become powerful. We will become rich. We will have streets bathed in gold. We will have nature intertwined into our architecture such that we remember the spirit of nature, the spirit of God that lives inside every single one of us. Because of that spirit, we will be able to do great things. We will be able to lead the world at that point. But first, we have to get our own house in order. There is no reason any country should listen to us. No reason any country should listen to me, for instance. First, we need to become powerful. America needs to become powerful, because once that happens, we will be able to finally be the beacon of freedom, the light of hope that exists within the world. And in order for us to get to that day, we have to create that now. You have to create that now. You have that power. You do. And I cannot wait, because I can see it. I can feel it. It's as if I can taste it already in my mouth. That future existing here and now. And I'm very excited for that. And I can't wait for that. And I know that we will all experience that whenever I see you in the sixth dimension.